So in this video, I'm going to explain how I cut out Formula 1 cars from an image on Photoshop. Now this obviously can be applied to anything, any images that you want to cut something out of. So this is a transferable skill, obviously just that the context in this is Formula 1. So yeah, without wasting any more time, let's start. Alright, so we're going to be using the 2021 Mercedes Challenger. This is mainly because this image is pretty dark, so it's actually quite a challenging one to cut out. And yeah, we like a challenge, and it makes sense to show you one that's a little bit more difficult maybe than one, an image of a car that's on a white background that you're trying to cut out. So I'm going to show you some of the techniques that I use, and yeah, let's go. So I've opened the image in Photoshop. Usually what I do is I make a new solid color, and I will make it the brightest green possible, because odds are that's not really going to ever feature in an image. And the reason I do that is so that when I start cutting bits out, you're going to end up having this green show through, which is going to show you that the image is isolated and the background isn't there. And obviously our finished product is going to be just the car on a completely green background, and when we turn that layer off, we can see that it'll be transparent. This is just a way so I can see what is being shown, what isn't being shown, and just make sure that I am actually isolating it, because if I put this on a black background, it's very hard to see what I have cut out and what I haven't cut out. Green background, I mean, doesn't really matter what specific shade, just the brighter the better. Then what I usually do is I will have the original image. Let's go back to the original image. I duplicate that, right click, convert to smart object, name your layers if you want, it's up to you, and I always keep the original layer at the background. This is just in case. You want to sort of do non-destructive editing up until the point that you don't need to do that anymore, and what that means is just making sure that you can undo things if you need to. Because there's nothing worse than cutting everything out and then, I don't know, your computer crashes or you change your mind about something. There's been a few times where I didn't realise that actually maybe the bottom of the car carried on, or there's a mistake basically. So just have that as a backup, and I mean you can put it under there just so you don't confuse yourself, and have this as the background layer, and yeah, you're pretty much ready to go. So as I said, this is a very dark image. I've chosen that on purpose, and what I do once this is converted, I will either make it a layer mask or I'll just start cutting. This is a secret little tip. I use a curves layer, and basically what I've done is I've gone through all three of these different channels and made a M or a W, moved all of these, and I've kept the RGB one completely solid. I do that, and now I've got a really good idea as to specifically where everything is, and all this is doing is just really taking all of the different colors and brightnesses and really cranking them all the way to the max. If you don't want to, if that's a little bit too complicated, if you just make a curves layer, I just crank it all the way, because you can delete this afterwards. This is just so that you can see exactly where all of the edges are. And then you can start going from there. So my usual method is, I think, with people and stuff like that on Photoshop now, you can do select subject. It does give okay results, but it's not very good, to be honest. It never really you end up with a lot of jagged edges. Obviously you'd have to go through and start cutting out the inside. The wheel is all over the place, so to be honest, I don't even bother with that. I would just straight up use the pen tool. If you're not familiar with the pen tool and you want to learn, beziermethod.ac, I'll put a link up, but this is a really good way. I wish I actually had this when I was learning. This is a good way just to understand how the pen tool works, and it really is just a case of clicking through the tutorials and understanding how to draw different shapes, how to make straight lines, how to do bends, because obviously this is a circle, and you can make perfect circles on here, etc, etc. But in terms of actual practical use on this car, let me just put my crazy filter on. It's really just a case of going through. You're just following obviously the curves of the car. So when it comes to the pen tool, a straight click is going to give you a straight line, and then if you click and hold, you can start to maneuver that line and the edge. And up to here, okay, that goes down this, it's a click and then a bend, click down, and yeah, it's kind of long because there's so many different jagged edges to an F1 car, but it's a case of click and hold, pull it so that the bend is there. Okay, next click and hold, because now there's another bend and it's not a straight line. And then where here, this next line is going to pull some of this ground texture in. If you press A, it gives you the selection arrow again. You can now move this and maneuver it, because otherwise I'm going to end up having some floor in there, and that's going to waste my time later on having to come back and clean it up. So move that, click here. If I want to manually change where that line is, I can click Alt on the keyboard and drag this around and sort of line it back up again. And it's just click, drag, there we go. And I usually try to, when I'm cutting these things out, I would rather take a little minuscule section out of it rather than have some part of the floor. If I need to go back, and you'll see why in a minute, I can just fill that in. So it's a case of click, hold, click and drag. And as I said, if you're not familiar with the pen tool and how to cut things out with that, definitely give this a go. Definitely look up some other tutorials as well, because things like let's say the magic wand tool, which I know back in the day I used to think was the greatest thing ever. If you look at that selection, that is pretty poor. You're going to end up with half the car, the floor is still in it, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fast forward all of this, and we're going to cut the entire car out, and you'll see exactly how I sort of refine things, etc. So I'll see you in a second. Alright, so basically now, because this is all complete, I've closed all of this loop off. If you press Command Enter on a Mac, I assume it's Control Enter on Windows, we've now got the selection of the car, and if you hit the mask button, no worries if yours does this. If you just click on the mask itself and then press Control or Command I, you'll reverse it. And then it's a case of, at least for me, cleaning some of this up, because like this wheel is a bit janky, other bits I can see. So it's a case of just cleaning those up. Now, something you can do is use the brush, and I would suggest using the hard brush as opposed to the soft one. Go through, and rather than having to like pen tool everything all over again, you can just go through and brush out what you don't want. This isn't always the best way to do things, but when you're just trying to clean some small bits up, and you know, if you've got a pen and a tablet, then this is probably much more accurate way of doing it rather than me trying to do this now with a mouse. But just going through and sort of sorting some of those bits out. So like this, where there was such a hard curve, you know, the brush probably isn't the best way to do it, because you want it to all sort of curve together. So what you can do, and what I tend to do, is I'll use the brush and actually brush this back in and use it as the guide. Put the data back into the thing, and then with as few anchor points, which are these, as possible, just to kind of keep the curve as natural as it can be. Just go back through. There we go. And if I just pull this over, and now cut that out, brush that out. So we've still got this little bit here, so that's fine. We can just go through and brush those out, and that looks a lot more natural. And then yeah, it really is a case of, we've got this mask now. Slap the layer on just to see, where does the car start, where does it end. Sometimes you have to guess a little bit and go through, and it's just repeating the same thing again, just curving it round. If I turn that off, I can't even see what's there, so I'm just going to ignore it, if I'm honest. As I said, creative license kind of comes into it sometimes, and then it's a case of closing it. Control enter again. Let me turn this off. So yeah, in here you can press shift and it gives you a straight line, but in this instance not really applicable. And just being careful to like really, because this is you start to appreciate you know, the curves on these cars when you're sort of zooming in and spending so much time like staring at them. So you want to sort of do it justice, at least in my mind. So in this instance, we can't see, unless you turn the brightness all the way up, that the exhaust carries on, or where the lights are actually. In this instance, it's kind of irrelevant, because the car is so dark, you're just going to end up with rather large sort of dark sections. So I would rather go through here and cut it to this exact point. It's kind of common sense, but again, I guess it would just fall under creative license, really. What do you think looks good? What do you think works? Will someone notice? These are just tiny little things that I sort of weigh up when deciding, like, what do I cut and what do I not cut, and what do I put in and what do I not put in. So we'll just do this, curve it along. Again, all it is clicking and holding and pulling it until I sort of see that it's a similar, close enough shape to what it is I'm trying to cut out. And you'll notice that there is very few, a lot of the times, like dead straight lines. So it's just a case of closing that group, Command Enter, now we've got it selected, and then just rubbing everything out that's in there. So everything is cut out on the car. You could make small refinements here and there. One of the things I like to do, and this can vary because I'm looking specifically at this area at the back where things are quite thin. I'd also look at the sort of front here. I've missed this section, but pretend that I've cut it out, and I've cut this bit out cleanly. One thing you can do to kind of help refine things, and I've found it really useful, I mean, even if I have to go back and put things back in, is if you go to filter, other, minimum. I usually set this to 1, and what that does, and it's very subtle, but it will knock off about 1 pixel worth of this entire selection. If I go back and sort of redo it, you can see where before and after it's taken another pixel into the object that I'm cutting out, and that really helps sell the sort of clean aspect. The only issue is when you have really thin things, you're going to have to go back and sort of brush this back in, but it's helped clean up this jagged edge here. So it's just something to be aware of, and What I suggest doing is right clicking, disable layer mask, and just go back and see if things have disappeared. Have you missed anything? Brush tool again, and then pen tool. And the only suggestion I have for getting better with pen tool is to practice. Practice. I did not ever used to use it. Back when I was learning, I didn't know how to use it, and now it's easily one of my favorites, an essential part of sort of my day-to-day job and how I cut cars out. So we've got that sorted, and as I said, that other and minimum really helps sort of make things a lot cleaner and really separate it from the pack. But I mean that's pretty much all I really do. If you've got a really nice clean cut car, it really helps sell that illusion that it's there, and nothing sort of sets an edit back worse than a poorly cut subject. Hopefully you've got something from this, and looking forward to seeing your edits with pen tool. See you later.